Hey friends, it's Corey from Hey Let's Make Stuff. In today's video, we are going to be talking a little bit more about the xTool S1 diode laser. Specifically, we're going to be looking at all of the different accessories that you can get with this laser that can help expand the number of things you can make and also make your crafting easier and safer. In case you missed my original overview and review of this laser, I will go ahead and link it. And I do think it is a very capable laser that a lot of people in my particular audience will like, despite it looking a little bit intimidating. The laser by itself is really great and very capable, but when you add some of the accessories that I'm going to talk about in this video, you really can take your laser crafting to that next level. So the first thing you might notice is that this laser is sort of bigger than it was when I did my original video, and that's because the first accessory I have here is the riser base. This piece down here at the bottom is the riser base. It was pretty easy to assemble, but it did sort of take two people to put everything together because I did have to lift this laser and put it on top of the riser base. In addition to assembling that riser base, which was pretty easy, I did also have to remove the base plate from the laser itself. Thankfully, that was really easy as well. I think it was maybe 8 screws, and then you just sort of lift it out of the bed of the machine really easy. That base plate can then be used in the bottom of the riser, and that can protect your work surface from, any errant engraving or cutting. The riser base allows you to engrave much taller projects. So for example, I could put something like a wooden box in here and I could engrave the top. There are actually several slots for that base plate in the riser base, so depending on what you are engraving or what you're cutting, you can go ahead and change the height of where you have that base plate for your material. Additionally, there are doors in the front and the back, so I'm going to go ahead and open the front one here. There's an identical one in the back, and this is basically used as a pass-through, so you can engrave or cut much larger projects using this pass-through. If you are using the laser with the doors, however, the laser itself no longer complies with Class 1 laser safety standards, so if you are using that, they do give you a pair of safety goggles, and you'll want to wear these if you're using the laser with the doors open. And then I'm going to ask this same question for every accessory we talk about here. Is it worth it? I think if you want to make those sort of projects with more depth or those taller projects, you're definitely going to need that riser base. If you want to use a few of the accessories I'm going to talk about later in this video, you're also going to need the riser base. If you just want to make flat projects, cutting wood and some acrylic, engraving flat things, then you don't need the riser base. But overall, I do think that it really increases the number of things that you can make with your laser. Next up, let's talk about the Honeycomb Panel, which basically replaces those triangle prisms that I talked about in my first video. The Honeycomb Panel basically allows the air to circulate under your projects, especially while you are cutting, reducing the risk of fire. You can use that Honeycomb Panel with or without the riser base. So if you're using it without the riser base, you just sort of place it in the bed of the machine and you're good to go. If you are using it with the riser base, I found the instructions a little confusing. So I got the instructions with the Honeycomb Panel, and it talked about a riser base that I don't have. So I kind of had to figure out what I was actually doing here. The instructions wanted me to sort of insert that Honeycomb Panel into the different slots, but as far as I can tell, it's not big enough. So instead, I just moved that tray up to the different slots and I was able to use that Honeycomb Panel at different heights. The Honeycomb Panel also comes with some magnetic material pins. And basically these are designed to help you hold down certain materials, especially if they're bending or warping a little bit. I actually really like them. For my Glowforge, I actually cut my own pins out of wood and I'm constantly breaking them. So I actually really like these sort of metal magnetic pins. I think they work a lot better. And I think it was really nice of xTool to include those with that honeycomb base. So is the Honeycomb Panel worth it? Absolutely. Absolutely. Of everything I'm going to talk about here, it is my favorite accessory, and that's because I really don't like the triangle prisms. I find them really difficult to use. They skitter all over the bottom of the machine, and yes, it's nice that it has them, but honestly, the Honeycomb Panel is just so much easier to use, and if you're going to get anything, that would probably be my #1 recommendation. Next up is Air Assist. So I have my little Air Assist box here. You get this box and you get some tubing and some cords here. And Air Assist is basically a tool that blows a little bit of air as you're cutting onto your project, and that helps reduce charring and the possibility of fires. I have to say, this was incredibly easy to install compared to my xTool M1. The xTool M1 Air Assist, you had to actually work with all of the tubing here to get it inside the machine, connect it to the laser head. I found it really difficult to install. This was so much easier. You just have this one piece of tubing, plugs into the back of the machine, you have one cord, also plugs into the back of the machine, and you're ready to go. To use the Air Assist, it has a couple different levels here and you can turn it on. I will say that it's very loud, and I'm going to turn it on here and I hope it comes through just how loud it is. The Air Assist on the xTool M1 is also loud. It does have sort of a jiggly base. I'm not really sure. I'm sure there's a technical name for it, but I don't know what it is. So it does keep it from sort of rattling around on your desk itself. However, it is still really loud. I will say that the laser itself is pretty quiet, but sort of these accessories can be really loud. So the combination of the air assist plus the filter I have, which I'm going to talk about here in a few minutes, really does contribute to this being quite a loud setup. I am going to run through these here so you can actually see how loud this just particular machine gets. It has 4 different levels. So I've got 1 here, not too bad, 2, louder, 3, pretty darn loud, and max, really loud. My biggest complaint with the Air Assist, in addition to it sort of being loud, is that it's not built into the machine, and I feel like it really should be built into the machine. My Glowforge Pro and my Glowforge Aura both have it built in, and it's kind of annoying to have this like separate box when I really feel like an Air Assist should be something that comes with the machine. So is the Air Assist worth it? I think yes and no. Honestly, if you're masking your materials, you probably don't need the Air Assist as much. I did a video last week about masking your materials, so I'll go ahead and link to that. That can help you so much with a lot of the charring. But if you're still seeing charring or you're having issues with maybe flare-ups and other things like that, you may want to try the Air Assist. The next thing I'm going to talk about is the RA2 rotary attachment. And I think this is one of the things that really expands the number of things that you can make with your laser. The RA2 basically allows you to do circular processing. So this is how you're going to engrave tumblers and mugs and wine glasses and baseballs and ornaments and all sorts of other really cool things. There are 2 versions. There is the RA2 and the RA2 Pro. I do have the RA2 Pro. I'm just going to show you basically what it looks like in the machine, but because using it is a very involved process and I actually found it really intimidating when I first got it out of the box, I'm going to do a separate video on how to use it in its entirety. If I tried to do that in this video, I feel like it would just take over the entire video and it would be way too long. So in an upcoming video, we're going to go into that RA2. We're going to talk about all the different things you might be able to make with it. And I'm going to show you specifically how to use all of those different parts because I know that when you're looking at them in the box, they may look really intimidating. They did to me, and I do this, you know, as my job. And so I can't imagine somebody who's kind of coming to this with more of just a hobbyist background looking at that. And I mean, I can imagine just closing the box and putting it on a shelf because it does look really confusing. So stay tuned for that video. But in this video, I did want to talk about whether or not I think the RA2 is worth it. And I really do if you want to make those types of projects. This is something that sets the xTool machines apart. You can't do that in a Glowforge, you can't do that in a lot of the other lasers out there on the market. I think that is something that really does set xTool apart. Note that if you want to use the RA2, you are going to need the riser base because you won't be able to fit something like a tumbler in there without that riser base. Next up, let's talk about that smoke purifier that I mentioned earlier. So basically, when you are using your laser, it is removing material as you are cutting and scoring and engraving. And that material sort of turns into fumes and smoke and debris, and that gets vented out of the back of the machine. Now you sort of have 2 options because you don't want all of that smoke going into your craft space. So you can vent it out of a window. You can just, put the vent pipe up to a window, or you can use something like the smoke purifier. I don't have this particular machine near a window, so I do use that smoke purifier. However, if you are near a window, I would recommend the window just because the smoke purifier is quite expensive at $800. It's almost the cost of a whole new laser. And if you have the ability to, vent out of a window, you're going to be able to save yourself a lot of money. I also find that the smoke purifier is quite heavy, even though it's on wheels. It's just a little unwieldy to move around. And I'm not gonna lie, I cracked my shin on it the other day and it really hurt. So just be aware that it is kind of big, it is a little bit cumbersome, but if you're not near a window, you definitely need it. If you're by a window, however, you may be able to do without it. There are 2 more accessories that you can get for your xTool S1. I don't actually have them, but I'm going to mention them pretty quickly here. The first is the Automatic Conveyor Feeder, which basically turns your entire laser into sort of a giant conveyor belt and allows you to process enormous materials up to 118 inches long. This means you can make huge projects or you can batch huge pieces of material. That's not necessarily something that I want to do, so I don't have that. You do need quite a large amount of space to be able to work with it. You'll need a desk with space at the front and the back to be able to set up the conveyor feeder. That conveyor feeder does store much smaller, so you don't have to keep it out all the time, but you do need to be able to have a lot of space to work with it. Even in this giant craft room, I don't even think I have the right amount of space. You will also need the riser base because the conveyor belt works with the riser base. Is it worth it? I guess if you're making really large projects or you want to batch, it could be worth it. It's not worth it to me, which is why I don't have it, but it might be worth it to you depending on what you make. Finally, I'm going to talk about the fire safety set. It's basically a small box that connects via tubing to the back of your machine, much like the air assist. And the fire safety set automatically detects whether or not there is a fire in the machine. It automatically detects the flames, it cuts power, it triggers an alarm, and then it automatically sprays a harmless CO2 gas to basically douse the fire inside. If you're particularly worried about a fire, or maybe you're using materials that tend to be a little bit more flammable, or you're doing tests on materials that a lot of people haven't used, you may want to think about getting the fire safety set. That CO2 gas is just so much better for your machine than actually spraying something like fire extinguisher foam inside, and a lot of times it can save your machine from a particularly big fire. The fire safety set, of course, does not replace the need for sort of constant vigilance when you are laser cutting. Again, there is an emergency button on the back of the machine here. If you ever see a problem, you can just hit that emergency button and it will cut power to the machine. You should always be in attendance whenever your laser is cutting anything. So is the fire safety set worth it? For me, probably, because I live in a wood cabin in the middle of the woods, I do feel like I am probably more afraid of wildfires than a lot of people, and I don't want, to take down my entire neighborhood from a fire. I do always watch my machine. I always have a fire extinguisher, and I always have a fire blanket handy, but I do feel like the fire safety set would give me that extra peace of mind. Those are the accessories for the xTool S1. Remember that I am going to do an upcoming video on how to use that rotary attachment, just because it's so much more involved than I can go into in this video. If you have any questions about the accessories that I have shared here, please leave them down in the comments. For more laser, Cricut, sublimation, and DTF videos, subscribe to my channel. I'll see you next time.